checking for me, no one checking on me, so I had to go run up a check. I got the message on me, ain't no flexing on me, my attorney gon' call and collect. Blessings on blessings for me, my successes only made them envious, they got upset. I had to put all their egos in check. I want the money, the power, respect, and I heard you know so-and-so, you not a threat, cause I really know so-and-so, they like my family, so they go pretend that they cool till they bust at your motherfucking chest. I'm getting gutter, my flow been like butter, my check in the bank, they see the number. All of my haters feel one of two ways, really upset or they show some respect. I can't even think about it, I've been up, so read about it, no beat around it, straight to it, no ring around it. You coming for me, we'll see about it, we'll never see it when I get my feet up. 100 meters where I run the fee up, and go from chinging on a monopia. I had to re-up on a reel, so you stay defeated, and put it back into the bit, cause I don't really need it. I heard they checking for me, no one checking on me, so I had to go run up a check. I got the message on me, ain't no flexing on me, my attorney gon' call and collect. Blessings on blessings for me, my successes only made them envious, they got upset. I had to put all their egos in check. I had to put all their egos in check. You're not entitled to anything else. I get 10 years of this under my belt. Your art isn't art, they don't feel it, and nobody hears it. Initiative stay on the shelf. Your ego done got in the way. It gotta die today. It gotta go. You should be happy I lighten the load. The weight of your arrogance, heavy as stone. I make an appearance, they already know. That chip on your shoulder gon' crumble and fold, yeah. It's not a secret that you have been fearing the shit that I'm on. So you back to the brag and the boast. But I'm in a class of my own. I heard they checking for me, no one checking on me, so I had to go run up a check.
Alrighty, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Drone Brews. I think this week, we finally got all of our audio issues completely 100% solved. So everything should be coming in loud and clear really quickly. I'd love the moment just to go ahead and greet the chat. A lot of you guys in here. Last week, we set a all-time high 197 concurrent viewers. That was absolutely awesome. We had hit a on-stream account for 200 likes. I see we got 21 likes in this chat here. 1 dislike. Who's that 1 dislike from? Who do you think that's from? We'll have to see. It may have something to do with the guests we have on today and the topic. I'm not sure, but maybe we'll discuss here in a little bit. Bob Casey, good to see you. Michael Belshi, great to see you. JSK Enterprise, Rennie Carlo. Look, Mom, a drone. We got Luca in the chat. We've got Jonathan Jackson, Leonard Ogleby. I fix shit. What's going on there, Dan? 107 Drones. We got Londonard, Fly, Dream Media, Intel Maxwell, Multi-Rollers, One Vision Aerial, Mountaineer, FBB, Drone Life, Phil Summers, Yellow Rose Drones, Ray Kelly. How's it going, Ray? Mad Props Media, Lambo Drive Zambo, and Sergeant Rock. If I missed anybody, I apologize. There's a lot of you. It's filling up. The room's filling up real quick. We've got an amazing guest on tonight. He's no stranger to the drone community. It's a man who needs absolutely no introduction. Dan, thanks so much for that super chat, brother. Appreciate you, man. That's an inside joke. He's a man that needs absolutely no introduction. They call him Papa Pilot Institute. We'll bring him in, Mr. Greg Reverdiau. See, I haven't got his name right. What's up, Greg?
I'm impressed, Ken.
I know.
What's going on, man?
You want to know how I used to pronounce your name? Reverdiau.
I know how you used to pronounce mine. Like everybody else, incorrectly.
Yeah, but you know what? We fixed it.
I know.
It's all about fixing things.
Sorry, repetition every night, 15 times before you go to bed.
So tonight we're talking about how to price drone work. I think that's a pretty popular topic. When you look over all the Facebook groups, usually I would say at least once, maybe sometimes even twice, 3 times a week, that is what a question that somebody is answering. And while there isn't really a one size fits all answer, I feel like you are pretty much, I would say, my go-to expert, like when I'm looking at pricing something that's outside of real estate. Like I get it, how to price real estate stuff, but like drone work specifically, I go to you. So talk to us a little bit about drone pricing. And obviously there's a lot of nuances, so everybody's looking and ears wide open.
Yeah, there is. And by the way, I know who left that thumbs down. It was Billy Cow.
Oh, was it Billy Cow? You know what? He's just that guy, man.
that little turd. So let's talk about drone pricing. Drone pricing is complex. Actually, I'm going to take drone out of the picture.
Okay.
Business pricing is
Sure.
complex, right? This is when we look at your business, there's a lot of things that you need to look at. The first thing that I would tell people is go take a look at your competition. What is the competition charging? And how does your product realistically, keyword realistically,
Right.
compare to the competition? Is this something that you can line yourself up with? Is this something that you can do better? And like I said, realistically, you got to look at your stuff and you got to say, well, you know what? I'm not there yet. I'm not Ken Dono level. I'm not Billy Kyle level just yet. And I can't charge these prices, but maybe I can charge a little bit less and I can get these customers that Ben and Ken and Billy don't want to deal with. So those are the things that I always tell people. The first thing, go and take a look at the competition and see if this is it. And then from here, kind of take a look at the overall picture in your area. You may live in a very small town. I grew up in a 200 people town. Do you think there's a lot of demand for drone business? Probably not. Do you live in Prescott? Do you live in Orlando? Do you live in LA? Now there's a very different market. So what portion of that market do you think you can get after? And then, based on these numbers, based on what you plan on pricing, how much do you need to survive? Because if you're going to charge $100 a pop, how much money do you need to make every month after you pay all your bills, after you pay all your expenses, and then you pay yourself? How much of that do you need to survive? And is this a realistic approach? If you find out that you have to shoot five houses a day, can you do 5 houses a day, Ken?
Yeah, I can do 5 houses a day. But it seems that bad things, the more you take on, bad things like today, bad things happen. Like I lost an SD card like mid shoot. Now I don't get paid for that shoot. So those things happen. So, but
yeah. So you got to think about it. Is it 5? Is it 5? Is it 10 a day? Is it 15 a day? What is it going to be? And then is this something that's realistic? So I think when we look at pricing, and obviously there is other things that go into this. You have to figure out if the footage is going to be used by a realtor. Is it going to be used by Netflix? Is it going to be used by local TV? Is it going to be used in a movie? There's a lot of ways that you're going to price your stuff. And then the one thing that I'm going to tell people is know your customer. There's one company in town that I do business for, even though I have a business that teaches people online, and I still go and fly once in a while for them because they ask me, and I know their budget, and I'm not going to charge them the price that I would charge somebody else because I know what their budget is, but I also want to continue that relationship with them because it helps them. And down the road, I know it's going to help me because that relationship can bring me more than just that specific business. So you have to think about that. I hear people sometimes say, hey, I don't get the drone out of the box for less than $500 a day. Okay, well, I think you need to rethink that, especially if you're starting early. You can't be that cocky. I hate to say that, but you got to think about, like, what is this long term? And I know some people promise, they say, yeah, we're going to have a relationship. We know the SROs online. I'm building a relationship. I'm going to give you all this business in the future. And sometimes it doesn't work, but you have to really kind of gauge your customer and make sure that it works. So I think that's a good beginning. And also figuring out, what are you offering? I know, Ken, you offer way more than just aerial photography and videography, which I would recommend everyone does that. Just offering drone photography, drone videography can make it very difficult to get customers. And at one point, did you do that, Ken, for you? Was it from the beginning? Was it, later on you realized that you needed to do more?
Yeah, I think it was I want to say it was probably 3 or 4 months into founding my business after I got my 107. I realized really quickly that people weren't calling me just for a drone. And this was back 2018, I think it was. And people weren't calling me. I was like, crap, what do I do? I want to work with real estate agents. If I had to think about it all over again, I may have chose a different course, but I wanted to work with them. And I asked one of them, I said, hey, we do the, she's like, yeah, but not then if I use you and I use this guy that does everything, I got to make 2 calls. I was like, Good point. So, I ended up putting the camera to good use. So doing terrestrial work does help, but I think when you're going to do just like drone work specifically, it becomes more niche down, like into mapping or thermals or even inspections, where you just need a drone, or you need somebody that's certified that understands the data that you are capturing. And I think too, when you start talking about how many jobs a day you can do, it gets even more limited when you start talking about mapping or even thermal capture, because those can only happen at certain times of the day, maybe in the morning or in the evening. And if you're mapping something thermally, you may only get one job a day. So you have to make that one job a day absolutely count. Same thing that goes for mapping. Each job has to absolutely count, which is makes things a little bit more critical and a lot more crucial at that point, I think.
Yep. So you mentioned something in here that brings me to another idea.
What's that?
You shouldn't charge necessarily based just on the amount of time that it takes you to do the job. I see
True.
people say, well, I think I'm worth $20 an hour, $50 an hour. Think about it from a standpoint of what value are you providing to your customer. And again, keep your customer in mind. They may have a budget, but think about the value that you're bringing to them. You may be saving them thousands of dollars, and it may take you 2 hours to do the job. But splitting that in half, right? What you're saving them, then if you do it in 2 hours and you charge $500, that's not a bad deal. So you got to think about the value that you bring. Somebody said one time, you get paid for the amount of problems that you solve, and
It's a good way to look
your
at it.
salary is going to be based on the amount of problems that you solve. And that's a great way to look at your worth, I think, is to figure out exactly what is it that you're solving for your customer. And we have, I'm not here to sell courses, but we do have a
Sure.
business course on the platform. And in that business course, what I do is I walk people through 27 steps to build a business plan. And I think a lot of people fail, and pricing is only like a tiny little portion of it. You can't get to the pricing, quite frankly, until almost the very end of your business plan, because you got to figure out how many customers you think you're going to get, how much money do you want to make, how much money can you realistically make, what is your
Right.
competition charging, and all these things all put together. That's really what brings your bottom line and say, okay, I can charge this much, and based on that, I can do that many houses a day, or I can do that many acres a day, or I can do without having to hire somebody else. I know you're in the process of expanding your team. At what point do you say, this is too much, I don't have enough time, I have enough business, now I need to bring in somebody else into the picture, right?
Yeah,
Because you got to
that's
think about growth. So what was it for you?
you know what? And we just talked about this earlier this week. I said I finally hired an editor to handle YouTube videos, because as you start growing, you start expanding, something is going to suffer inevitably, right? Like something is going to go to the
Yep.
wayside. Like you have to make your choice. And for me, it was YouTube. I was in the middle of a studio move. My real estate business started blowing up, in an exponential way. We were pulling on more clients. We're at, I think I'm at like 40 clients concurrently right now, which I feel is a lot for one singular person. I haven't
Yes.
expanded there, but I don't think I will for a little while. But there's drawbacks to that too, and I'll explain. But I was getting completely overwhelmed. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I had that whole mental breakdown with Etsy and them pulling listings. And I was just like, I let everything get to me. And it was because there was just too many things on the plate and some things were spilling over. And finally,
Yep.
I had an opportunity to bring somebody on, and they showed me what they can do. And I was like, you know what? Let's just try it. Let's see if it makes life a little bit easier. And it did. And I was like, wow, okay, you did awesome with that. I really didn't have to give you much guidance. Gave them another project. They did another project and it came out awesome. And the cool thing is, like, you can bring people on, you can start expanding, and you don't have to have full-time employees. You don't have to have full-time employees. You can have part-time employees. The cool thing about freelance, they can be just as freelance or just as piecework as you are. I always call this like doing drone work or real estate work. It's piecework because you're getting paid by the job sometimes. So I hire people as needed, or what they call that, per diem. I hire people as I need. I don't keep a full-time employee. It makes it easier at the end of the year. I don't have to have workers comp and all those things that are required by having full-time employees. So keep everybody,
Yep.
1099. I think that helps. But going back to what the charge for, I was thinking about, last year I did a job for Hulu that Vic recommended me for. And Vic and
Mhm.
I talked about, what we were going to charge and what he was charging. So I was trying to be linear with what we were charging, but you come up with a day rate. Like, what is your 10-hour day rate? Like, what are you okay to charge for 10 hours of your time? And then
Mhm.
also what goes into that is the equipment that you're using. I also bill based upon equipment. So I have different day rates for different equipment. A Mavic day
Yep.
rate is not going to be as much as an Inspire because you have to calculate your risk. You have to factor in insurance. So there's a lot of things that I base into my price. So depending on what equipment I am flying will depend on what type of day rate I am billing a customer. And with these
Yep.
smaller, much more portable drones, you can get away with, a little bit less of a day rate. But if somebody asks me for Inspire 2, they're going to be, maybe $2,500-$2,600 a day if it's somewhat local, right? I think that's a pretty
Mhm.
reasonable day rate. I try to think about, okay, if I'm at a total loss or I have to do an insurance claim, my deductible on most situations is like $500. So I need to at least be able to meet my deductible and still profit because now that equipment may be down if we had an accident or something like that. So those are all things too
Yep.
that need to be factored into creating a day rate.
Or you're thinking of your costs, right? You have a cost of
Yeah,
running the
there's a
business. A lot of
cost.
people say, "Well, I just got to drive my car." It's a lot more than driving your car. It's your car, it's your insurance, it's your maintenance, it's your tires, it's your fuel, it's
Yep.
your everything that you put into it, right? But there's also way more than that. There's your software that you're going to use.
Yep.
Possibly, if you use Adobe, you have a fee that you have to pay every month. If you're doing mapping and you're doing data analysis afterwards, you got to pay for something that's going to cost several $100s a month.
Correct.
If you have one customer to pay for it, then one customer has to absorb that cost. If you have 10 customers, then you can lower your prices a little bit and spread that cost more evenly. This was something when I managed flight schools that was absolutely a killer. A flight school only makes money if the airplanes fly. Well, what happens the week that you have a hurricane? When I was in Florida, and you can't fly the airplanes for a whole week, what do? That money is gone, and guess what? That money is never coming back because you can't double fly the airplanes on the next day. It just doesn't work that way. And so you have all your fixed costs. Your rent is still there. Your insurance for the aircraft is still there. If you're leasing your aircraft, you still have a cost. It was an absolute nightmare. And as a drone pilot, you're still going to have these issues. You're still going to be, based on the weather, you're not going to be able to fly. Based on what you just said today, you lost a card. You're not going to be able to fly. You got to write that off. You may have somebody you hire for your third party. That's a cost. Somebody doing your editing, whatever it is. Of course, you've
Right.
got marketing in here. I know you don't do a ton of marketing, but you've also built that over time. Somebody that gets started might want to do marketing just to get ahead of the
So,
competitor.
so,
So
so
that's
talk
another
about the
cost you have
marketing
to think
side
about.
because I think that's something where I see a lot of people get that wrong. And I only say that because I see Facebook and like every so often, like this drone ad for another company will pop up. And I feel like a lot of times they're racing to the bottom with their ads. They're really trying to present this
Mhm.
lowest bottom barrel price. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Marketing is difficult because you got to find where your target market is going to be. Your target market as a drone pilot might be the CEO of a company. Your drone pilot might be your market might be a realtor. It might be the person that owns a mine because you're going to do your mapping for them. It might be the head of a realtor agency. So going online to advertise for that is difficult. How do you target? How do you know? How does Facebook know that somebody is in that position? So that's very difficult. At Pilot Institute, we're getting lucky because people search things, and then Google knows and Facebook knows, and then it's able to retarget when you do that because it's drones. But people that buy drones are not your target. People that own houses and are realtors are your
Right.
target. So how do you find that? A good place to do this, quite frankly, is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a place for business people. So you have the ability to maybe target a certain segment and get in front of the decision makers. That's difficult. You got to
Right.
know who the decision maker. Going door to door, handing out business cards is a good way to do it as well, but that's difficult because you may not get to the right place, and people don't like that, right? I don't
Yeah,
like it when people come to
I
sell
got
you
yelled at
something.
the other day. I'm pulling into a development and the security guard wasn't going to let me in. She goes, "You're Apex." I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Yeah, I got to talk to you about leaving your door hangers on people's doors for the roofs." And I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are you talking about? I don't do roofing. I work with real estate." No, no. You were in here the other day leaving door hangers. I said, "Not me." And come to find out there's an Apex roofing, but they leave door hangers. And people, I don't know. I think people like phone salesmen, door to door, like you knock on
Yep.
somebody's door today, everybody's like shook up, like who's at my door? Like, because nobody goes door to door. Usually you don't come over unannounced anymore. Back in the day, you can do that, but now it's like you don't like it's weird like to have somebody knocking on your door unannounced. It's
Yep.
just it's sort
So,
of weird.
you know, I totally agree with that, and it's difficult. The door to door, I would never have the personality to be able to do this. It takes a personality as well to be able to do it without sounding sleazy and too salesy. So that's
Yeah.
difficult. Um, the word of mouth is good. Finding one good customer that you can keep working with is a great way to do it. So your cost of acquisition is very low, and then if you're going to do ads online, stick with it. It takes time the platform to learn and to make sure to deliver to the right people. So
What's a good
I would
budget,
say
would you
don't.
say, for like somebody local? Like if you're targeting locally, I think that's where people mess up too, is they don't know what to spend or how far they're looking to target. If you're trying to target, let's say, 3 counties specifically, you know, how much do you spend on marketing at that point or advertising? How does it know? Does it give you like a geographical area in which to stop? I only ever done
Yes.
ads through Facebook essentially.
Yeah, it's gonna give you an area where you can target specific people, and then it's gonna give you an idea of how many people you're gonna reach.
Sure.
What you got to think about is, based on the number of people that you reach, you're not going to collect everyone. You're going to collect a percentage. So in your head, you got to have a realistic expectation. If you get in front of 100 people, if one person buys, okay, and you get in front of 100 people, let's, for simplicity's sake, every person that you get in front of, it costs you $1. You spend $100, and then you have one paying customer out of it. Then is that too much for the product that you sell? If you sell your product for $100, you've got no money left. So, by the way, this technique of pricing this is why mattresses are so expensive, because the in order to get into the mattress world, you have to spend. It's extremely competitive. They pretty much all come from a few factories in the
Right.
country, and in order to get in there, you have to be in front of people, and to get in front of people, you got to spend money. And the cost of acquisition, a friend of mine worked in that industry for a very long time. He was a CPA for them, and he was explaining to me, he said, that mattress that you spend $600 or $700 on it, he said about $300 to $400 of that is marketing to get in front of people.
That's
And it's
insanity.
just, it's insanity. And so you got to think about, okay, that cost of acquisition. Now, if you bring that person on board, but that person brings you a contract every month, that $100 isn't so bad, right? You spend
Right.
$100, you get a really high quality customer that's going to bring you more business. Um, if you're in the mapping world where the cost of return is a little bit higher, then why not? That person may talk to somebody else because you do a good job. Then I might
Right.
bring you another person. Now your cost of acquisition is $50 instead of 100 because you have two people. So I don't know that there is a specific number that's the key to it, but you got to think about, for every dollar that you spend, how many people are you going to bring in that are going to buy the product? And I think until you try it, set a budget aside and start with maybe $10 a day, $10 a day, $300 a month, or $20 a day, and do that for several months, kind of seeing how the kind of return that you get. What do you lose out of spending $300 to $600, even let's say $1,000 to test? And if it works, it works. Then you're going to bring that much more business. If it doesn't, then you invested $1,000 and you learned something.
Yeah. And I mean, I look at like, with you guys specifically, Pilot Institute, I mean, you for the most part, I would say it came out of nowhere. Like there, all of a sudden it was, I think it was like maybe 2-3 years ago, probably about 2 years ago, I started noticing it, and it was like it was more frequently, and about after I started noticing the first one, it was just relentless, and then somehow now here you are on my screen. So, but that's good marketing, and I always tell Johan all the time. I said, dude, you got the best marketing. Branding is key, and I think that's another point that goes into formulating pricing and building a business is having good, consistent branding. I see a lot of people, they start these businesses and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what to call it. They don't know what to name it. And it's got something with the drone. And I tell people all the time, don't do that. Come up with something clever. Come up with something that you can grow with. Like whatever business you decide to do or build, you want to make something that you can expand with. You don't want to niche yourself down necessarily. Unless you're going to put 110%, into something. Like if I called my company Texas Drone Co., I better damn well make that business successful, right? Which luckily he has. So, but
didn't you change your name? Didn't you change your name a few times throughout the process?
I did change it one time. But it used to be Apex Aerial. I had Aerial in there, and I took out Aerial and I put Imaging in there, which hindsight 2020, I probably wouldn't have even done that, because I told you I got sued by some like I had a law firm, they were subpoenaing me, but over an MRI scan, because they had me confused with another Apex Imaging. I'm media, and they were a medical, they were an MRI company or whatever. And I was like, I don't know they had my name on it and everything. I'm like, I don't do MRIs. I don't even have an MRI machine. If I did, we wouldn't be, trust me, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be on YouTube.
You wish you did.
I wish I was doing MRIs, right? So, but yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to go about, building a successful business. And I think that we're still in a period of time where there's a lot of growth, right? I feel like people think that the industry is peaked. I don't think it's peaked. I think every day, new opportunities that we didn't think were going to be plausible are popping up all the time. But like all things, some things you have to be quick to get on it. Like you got to be on the ground floor sometimes earlier, I think, with drones than you do in other industries. Otherwise, you miss out. What are your thoughts on that?
You have to be a visionary, and to a certain extent. So you have to have that vision that this is going to be the next thing, right? And like you said, every single day there is a new use of drone in the world for a different vertical. There's so many different businesses that use drones today. So I would say don't be afraid to just branch out sometimes and add more services that are available. It's going to require, the more investment is required into a drone, into equipment, into whatever it is, a sensor, the more chances that the competition is going to be low, right?
Yeah.
A high price of entry, a high cost of entry means that the competition is not going to invest. The guy that just started is not going to spend 15 to 20 grand on a good mapping drone, on a LiDAR unit, on a gas sensing unit, whatever it is. But these businesses are out there making pretty decent money. So, and if you're the first to do it, if you're early into the market, then you have the customers. And if you do a good job, you'll keep the customers. So that's something to think about. But it takes guts. It takes risk. It's risk. It's risk. And so you got to believe in yourself. And if you have the skills, then just go for it.
And I think that's the thing, though, I see too, is a lot of people, they'll take risk, they'll buy this equipment, but they don't necessarily have a plan. Like I see all the time, I'm buying an M30 or I'm getting an M300, whatever the case may be. They're willing to spend this $30,000, and I'll ask them, be like, so what are you going to do? How are you going to make that money back? Well, and then when they tell me their plan, I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that. You're going to lose your ass, because even if you sold that, street value, you're still going to lose at least $4,000 to $5,000 still. If you don't have a plan, you have to have a plan when it comes to building a business surrounding a drone. You got to have a plan.
That's why the business plan is so important.
Yeah. So you said it. We talked about it a little bit a couple of months ago. We actually talked about it. So Pilot Institute, yeah, like you said, we're not here to like sell the courses, but there is a really good business course that they do offer. I'll be sure to put a link in the description below of this video if you're interested in checking that out or seeing what it offers. Um, click the link, check it out. There's no obligation, obviously, for anything, but it's there. Just like all the courses that we have out there on pilotinstitute.com. They're all there to help you. There's a lot of free courses, and I encourage anybody, if you're just curious or trying to figure out like what drone is right for you, take a look at some of the deep dives every day. I see it every day, like 5-10 people signing up for the deep dive courses that we offer because they're different than what we offer on YouTube. Like YouTube, we have a certain amount of time that we can spend to put these videos out, but this is different. It's more in chapters, easily digestible.
Organized.
It's organized. So check those out. I want to transition in the conversation to talk about something that feels like a hot topic. It's becoming something more and more sensationalized. We're seeing it every day. As we near September, remote ID is becoming a reality. It's going to happen. So talk to me a little bit about, like, I know you have a lot of connections at the FAA. You're constantly talking with these people, making sure you're up to date, making sure the curriculum and the courses, the information that you're putting out is accurate. I'm seeing a lot of videos peddling panic, peddling misinformation. So talk to me a little bit about remote ID. What do people have to worry about currently right now?
So we get a lot of questions every day about which module should I get. Well, we get a lot of questions every day about what is my drone, remote ID compliant. And we actually made a video on our YouTube page that has like step by step. It's a long video, sadly, because it's more complex than you think. But you can go directly to your brand that you own, and then you can see exactly if your drone is compliant, because you have to look at some serial numbers and make sure that they match with the FAA website. But at this stage, I'm going to tell you, when the idea of remote ID came out, they put out this NPRM, this Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and there were a lot of issues with remote ID the way that it was spelled out. My biggest fear at the time was that they were going to force a fee in order to access the airspace, and right. I've been adamant, even before drones were a thing, I've been adamant about keeping the airspace access free, even on the main aircraft side, quite frankly, because Europe did this. I used to live in Europe. I haven't been in Europe. I haven't lived in Europe in 21 years now. And right when I left, they were starting to privatize the airspace, which meant that as a GA, as a general aviation pilot, you had to pay a landing fee, an approach fee to get to a certain airport. And it wasn't cheap. I mean, the airport that I was based at, it was 50 euros, 50, 60 bucks in order to just shoot an approach, land at the airport, and then take off again, because they had privatized that airspace. And so I had seen the damage that it had done to general aviation in Europe, and they never, quite frankly, recovered. And I'd never want to see that in the US. And of course, bringing remote ID, where you have to have a subscription in order to get approval, in order to share your location, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for drones. It doesn't work for airplanes. It doesn't work for helicopters. We have to stay away from that. So that NPRM, we fought pretty. I think I wrote a 13-page comment to the FAA on those issues, and to my surprise and a lot of people in the industry, they came back with quite a few changes. And one of those things was to remove the broadcast, to keep the broadcast, and to remove the network remote ID, which would have required a chip in your drone to share your location. So it didn't go away. Remote ID never went away. It's never going to go away. Sure. I think at one point we have to we have to kind of play with it and accept it. I know it's tough, but as far as where we are, this is kind of a long-winded answer. But as far as where we are today, the bottom line is this: we have broadcast modules that are going to be available. It looks like for an affordable price, $20 to maybe $30 for the cheapest ones. It's still a few months away, so don't buy anything just yet.
Sure.
Let's wait. I know I've talked to people. I've talked to at least 2 other companies that haven't released publicly any information, but they are working on modules. So I'm pretty excited because they're reputable. They're based in the US, and there will be options. I know that for a fact. Now, as far as the privacy issue and sharing your location and having to deal with all this, I'm going to say I'm a positive person. I'm going to say that I think it's going to be a lot less of an issue than we think it is. I think the distance that a cell phone is going to be able to pick up that signal, even if it's able to pick up that signal, is going to be fairly limited, which means that the people that we're worried about are probably going to give up pretty quickly on trying to find the person that's flying that drone because it's not going to work all that great. I think this is my personal thought, but and I hope in the sense that I'm right, because I am afraid of that privacy issue of having a 13, 14-year-old kid flying their drone and then somebody just not being happy about it and going to them with a firearm or even anything else and threatening a 13, 14-year-old kid. That just doesn't work. So as far as, scaring people, yes, it's a change. People hate change. I hate change, but we got to live with it. And I think we get to make the best out of it. And as far as, what the FAA has in store with remote ID in the future, they've had a document out there for a long time. I used to teach at BREW here in Prescott, and I used to teach that document 4 or 5 years ago. It's called the Concept of Operation 2.0 for UTM, Unmanned Traffic Management. And it's a fascinating document. It's about 80 pages. I've read it several times. I've made presentations on it to staff and to students. And in there, they highlight what the plan is for having an unmanned traffic management. Think about air traffic control system.
How many times
for drones? Yeah, go ahead.
How many times has that changed? Because I was reading the document today, and I watched the FAA's video. Since you were there, you taught this, and you've read this because we've talked about this. You said you've read this numerous times, front to back. Mm-hmm. How many times has that changed, or has there been amendments to the plan that they've presented?
So there's 2 documents. There's UTM, Concept of Ops, that's 2.0. So it's been changed once only.
Okay, so one time.
They have been mandated by the FAA, by Congress in the very latest Reauthorization Act that came out a couple days ago. I've read that too. That was 86 pages that Jason and I sat down, and for 5 hours we went through that document with a fine tooth comb, finding all of the different things that the FAA is going to have to do in the next until 2029. In there's actually a mandate that they update that document. So we should have a version 3.0 coming out, God knows when, probably in 5 years, because it's the FAA, and they work at the speed of government. But there's another document also that the FAA just came up with recently, which I think is a 1.0, and I'm not done reading that one. And it's an AAM concept of operation, and that's advanced air mobility, where they're adding larger aircraft into the picture. And this might be the document that's a little bit controversial, even though I don't think it is, but it highlights how drones, airplanes flying at low altitude, and AAM, advanced air mobility vehicles, are going to be sharing the airspace. And there's going to have to be concessions to be made between all 3 types of users, because there's going to be more and more people in that airspace. So all these things are not secret. The FAA has them out there. And by the way, that concept of operation came up from NASA. This wasn't even the FAA. NASA are the ones that dreamt the UTM concept with the 1.0, and then it was adapted and changed over time as we get new technology. So there's going to be more versions of it. It's a great document. It's actually not as boring as you think. The new one that they just came up with, I had to scratch my head a couple times because they have so many acronyms, and there's just so many acronyms. But it's a great read. I highly recommend anybody to go out there and just take a look, make your own decision.
Yeah, I've taken in quite a bit of video information that's been put out there, and I think for the most part, I think it's really easy for people to sensationalize this. They look at it like, any other law or regulation being put into effect. I guess I never really gave it much thought, just being on the the more the GPS side of things and just doing operate, like, I'm operating for business. So for me, filing a lance or flying, like, hey, I can't fly in this airspace because I can't get approval or whatever the case may be, it's never been like a deal breaker. And as of recent, I really haven't flown, and I'll say this, and this may sound terrible, I really haven't flown unless if it's for profit. My drones are tools for me. So if I'm using my tools, I'm doing it because it is something that is, moving my business along. And I get it. There's a lot of consumers out there and hobbyists that are concerned with this, that there's, their rights, their privacy is being violated in some capacity, and that, somebody's telling them they can't. I guess it's a natural reaction for many to rebel against things like this, because it's somebody's, taking something that you've had for, 4 or 5 years. Because realistically, the sans people that have flown fixed wings, the drone scene has really only been around for like 6 years, 7 years, realistically.
Yep.
And now
Well, I think,
now it's changing.
I think the bigger problem is that a lot of people need to realize that the airspace has been used by a lot of other people for a long time. And like you said, we're a new industry, and we have to play nice with everybody else that's in the airspace. We don't have priority. They don't have priority. We need to be able to share the airspace. And if we leave it as is, in 5 years, in 10 years, it's going to be a freaking mess, because we're going to get to the point where there's so many flights, and we're going to be like, oh shit, I wish we had thought about this before. And all of a sudden, we're 5 years behind everybody else. So we do need to talk about these concepts. We do need to think about, how do we bring a small AAM that has 4 or 5 people on board, that's fully autonomous, to share the airspace with a drone delivery, with a commercial drone, with a recreational drone, and with a helicopter that's flying all under 500 feet.
Right.
And so these things are not simple. And at one point, we're going to have to either have priority levels. The way that it's explained in the UTM 2.0 is corridors, 4D corridors. So it's a 3-dimensional plus adding time, where you're going to reserve a block of airspace for a specific time. And as you go through, then you'll have that airspace blocked. And then everybody else after that can start to use it again, or reserve it.
Like an on-ramp into a freeway, essentially, like sort of regulating the traffic. I mean, I get it. And in watching that video the FAA put out, I mean, it's abundantly clear the direction, my understanding why a lot of this is happening is obviously drone delivery. It's going to be a thing. Like, when this was first proposed and the first proposal came from Amazon, like this brilliant idea to do drone delivery, I think the idea, the concept of it was so ahead of its time, ahead of the maturity of the industry where it's at. It was ahead of the industry as far as what it could handle and how it could figure out how to make this operate safely. Because you're right, there's helicopters, even around here, they're well below, 400 feet. There's a doctor that literally, a dentist around the corner from me, he literally flies his helicopter to and from Tampa. You know how I can't even tell you, he must be killing it, for one, to be able to fly his little Bell to and from work each day and land at a private helipad like that. But that's just one example, for a period of time. Yeah, he's well below, 400 feet in some instances until he clears. But there's a lot of instances like that. And, I'm here right now. My office sits in Class D airspace. Technically, where my office sits, I am allowed 50 feet. But if I go just a block over, I'm allowed no feet. And we're still about 2.5 miles from the airport. So, I get it. I saw somebody said about, a 5,000 pound car is not a problem. And to that effect, I think, on the roadways, it's a much more controllable situation on the roadways. Like when you're talking about an accident in the road, though, it's different. It doesn't have the same magnitude.
Here's the complexity of the thing right now, is that we're talking about autonomous flights, right? So we're going to have the same issue on the road at one point, because
Sure.
we're going to have detect and avoid, and the Tesla driving by itself,
Yep.
those cars that drive by themselves, they have all these sense and avoid. Now we have to do the same thing with drones that are going to be flying autonomously up there, that have that detect and avoid sensors that are going to make decisions
Sure.
based on you flying your drone out there and making sure that nobody collides. So there is a ton of complexity. It is much more complex than, because we have a third dimension now, that we have to put into this. And of course, you've got the helicopters that are flying at low altitude
Sure.
that may or may not be broadcasting their location using ADSB. So interestingly, in that new document that the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2023, there is a mandate that any drones, large drones that are going to be flying in the airspace around complex airports, I'm going to
Sure.
call it that way, are going to have detect and avoid systems based on ADSB, because ADSB is required in those areas. So the FAA is thinking of those things, and having to put these things in place so that we have a safe airspace. That's their job. Their job is to maintain a safe and efficient use of the airspace. That's their motto. So it is complex, and I think remote ID plays a little bit of a part in there. I think the conversation around remote ID got hijacked by the three-letter agencies over time, where they wanted to use remote ID for a different reason than the FAA had envisioned.
Right.
The FAA and NASA envisioned this to be a traffic management tool, and I think it's been converted into being
A
a
nanny.
national security, to be
Yeah.
nice, a national security tool. And I don't think that's a good tool for that. And that was my comment 5 years ago on the NPRM. I said, if we're going to use this as a national security tool, it's not a good tool. It's because the bad guys are not going to be using remote ID to do their thing.
Right. Exactly. Either if you're going to be doing something nefarious, you're going to want to be flying completely under the radar and by any means necessary.
Yep.
And I think that's the way a lot of consumers look at this. A lot of hobbyists look at this. They're like, I've done nothing wrong. I've been a law abiding pilot. I've done what I needed to do. I mean, yeah, you got a couple of bad actors out there, and it's ironic that some of these bad actors are so public, and it puts things into a bad perspective for many. But no matter and I think a lot of people too, they get hell bent on the weight of a drone. Oh, it's only 249 grams. It's a flying paper. It's a paper plane. No, that's not the point, though. It's not the point. It's intention. It's your action. It always kills me, and it always kills me with the people that aren't here in the U.S. and they're just so passionate about what we're doing. Like, worry about your own damn airspace. Worry about your own freaking island. Worry about you. Worry about you, because you're not doing shit for us here. So you haven't done shit for us here, but sensationalize things and cause panic, and irrational thinking. That's the only thing that you have done. And that's the thing is, I think in order to see better amendments, because I'm sure as this goes, the FAA may say, okay, this is working, this is not working. And they'll adjust things as need be, but we're not going to know until it's fully implemented what's working and what's not working. And I don't think that, in meeting with the people myself, talking with members that are directly, in development with this, nobody seems like unreasonable. Like they all want to see it, try to be successful to an extent. And they want to do whatever they can to accommodate, but there's a lot of uncertainty. There's an immense amount of uncertainty, and they know that,
I agree.
and they're the first to admit that.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. The people at the FAA that I talk to regularly, they are the ones that they want to make this right. They want to do it right so that everybody stays safe. The good news is right now there's 6 testing sites in the U.S.
Yeah.
The Reauthorization Act is pushing for adding a lot more test sites, so they're going to be opening applications for that. That's stuff that just came out from that Reauthorization Act. So I think that's good. That's positive. They want to test more beyond visual line of sight. They want to test more complex scenarios of flying drones at night or flying drones that are larger, and integrating it into the airspace with more complex traffic. So I think we're on the right path. It's not going fast enough, I can tell you that, and everybody's getting
but
frustrated with that, and so am I.
it never has. It's always been a very slow, sort of grueling process. I mean, we're almost on 3 years now since this was actually introduced. If you go back to the initial videos on remote ID, 2020, like just shortly after COVID, that's I think when this is really started, going, and people were like, "Oh, this is going to be a thing." 3 years later,
Yep.
here we are. We're just now facing the implementation, the first implementation of this in September. So I guess the question, beckons, if we're not necessarily using this sort of as a monitoring system, essentially, do you believe that this is going to be a case by case basis, where if somebody sees something out of the ordinary, they're like, hey, what's that flight? It's in restricted airspace, or maybe like on a military base. They file the form for the information on the pilot. They determine that the pilot shouldn't be there. How do you think the follow up with the aviation, how does this get handled essentially? Because I'm sure the burning question, I think, for many is, if I make a mistake, is like a fine or a ticket going to show up in my mailbox? Like that, I think, is a burning question, something that a lot of people are truly concerned with.
I think it's going to be the same thing that the FAA has done so far, which is when stuff hits the fan. I know I can't say bad words. You told me I couldn't say bad words.
I
So
really
when
appreciate you
stuff
curbing your
hits the
language
fan,
this evening. It's been a real pleasure talking.
when stuff hits the fan, the FAA is going to investigate,
Sure.
and they're going to find out whether or not you did this on purpose or you didn't. And it's pretty quick talking to someone based on their behavior, based on their attitude, whether or not they did this on purpose or not. And they've done the same thing in the man aircraft world for a long time. And you do something stupid, they're going to come hard. You make a mistake, which is not doing something stupid, not the same thing. You
Sure.
make a mistake, and you're going to have to go with someone to get recurrent training. Could be somebody like Vic or myself or a drone pro that's out there, because that's what we do for the FAA. We do recurrent training for people when they make mistakes. Now, if you're going to do this 2 or 3 times, then they're going to find a pattern, and then they're going to come hard because you have a pattern of being unsafe. So, for the person that's going to be flying at 450 feet or 500 feet instead of 400, and they made a mistake, the FAA is not going to come after you because they won't have
Right.
that data in the first place. And even if they saw it, it's like a cop seeing you going 10 miles over on the speed limit. If you're going 15 or 20 miles over, yeah, they'll pull you over. If you're going 800 feet instead of doing 400, or if you're at 400 feet in a 50 zone, then yeah, they're if they find you and if they see you, then they'll come after you. But don't expect that the FAA is going to be sitting out there with a cell phone waiting for people to fly over and give them tickets. This is not how the FAA works. If somebody gets investigated because they were peeping inside of a house and somebody said, I saw this drone, it was right outside my window, and they have all the information, then yeah, you're going to get a phone call from someone, maybe even the police, because that breaks local regulation. So I'm not worried personally. I'm not worried.
I think
sometimes
a lot
I'm
of
going to
people
admit
shouldn't
it.
be worried, right? They shouldn't really. I
No.
think the mind naturally wants to sort of focus and get fixated on the negative. This fact that this digital license plate is essentially here. I mean, I get it. It can be worrisome. I understand that, and I get it. But I think the vast majority of people that are flying are not doing anything egregious. They're not, going out of their way to do something nefarious. So the reality is, nothing realistically should change for many. For many pilots, it should not change. And I would probably
No.
venture to say, even for FPV guys, there's not, the rules are ever changing, and rules need to change, especially when it comes to FPV. I would love to see sheltered operations become a thing here in the United States. Below a certain threshold, becomes a sheltered operation. I would love to get the bullshit with the goggles that you got to have a VO like that. That needs to be amended, and if the beyond visual line of sight becomes a thing, that maybe that gets lumped under that. I mean, those are things those are all good things, if they happen and they happen well enough. I mean,
Yep.
everything's evolving, and it's one of those situations where I think people need to, embrace certain change. Because the industry as a whole is just changing, like swiftly right before our eyes. Even though we say it's moving slow, there's a lot of aspects that are moving really quickly.
Oh, of course, and you should be worried if you're the guy that's flying in the middle of Philly at 600 feet in Class Bravo airspace, and you're 2 or 3 miles away from your drone. That's the kind of thing that the FAA is going to look into. And if somebody catches the signal in a serial number,
Yeah.
then you're going to be in trouble. And you should, quite frankly, you should. These are the people that we do not want in this industry. Those are the people that are going to give a bad reputation to the rest of drone pilots. The people that are peeping outside of a window inside of a house. Those are the people we don't want representing drone pilots, and these people should.
Here's one for you. D&D Ariel says, "What about HOAs? Should they have some say?" No, I don't think an HOA should have any say. The only thing the HOA needs to worry about is if your house is painted, your lawn is cut, and whether you have a vehicle parked in your driveway that has some sort of graphic or something on there representing a business. That's it. They don't control the airspace. They are in a national park. They should have no say. The reality is, if you're doing any sort of work, and I run into this quite a bit, I actually almost got into a fist fight with an HOA president of a very uptight neighborhood here in Brooksville, over flying, because he, again, the privacy concerns, and we're filming a property, we're fixated on a property, and I can show him all the data, everything. And it was such an ordeal, and I was actually really shocked that he didn't just call the cops. I would have much rather preferred that. Mm-hmm. Option B was to knock his front teeth down his shitter. That would have been fine too. But then I probably wouldn't be here. But that happens quite frequently, is where you have HOAs, they want to say what you can and can't do. And the reality is, in a neighborhood like that, unless you're down below a certain threshold, literally peeping in a window, from above, the reasonable right to privacy, I think, sort of goes away in those instances.
Well, there's expectation of privacy inside of your house, so that's a granted thing.
Sure.
Nobody can film inside your house.
Right.
If you're outside, then no. And even if you're behind, I know, and people don't like this, and I don't like it either. I had a drone flying over my property one time as I was building something I was building this building right here that I'm in, and somebody was flying their drone and clearly looking at what I was doing, probably heard the noise, and they flew their drone to see what was going on. Yeah, and it's not a good feeling, and I agree with that. But technically, you know what? I have no expectation of privacy. If I were naked in my backyard doing it as I was, using the hammer, then that's my own thing. I should not have any expectation of privacy at that level. So, but nobody wants to see that. So
no, I was going to say, nobody wants to see those pasty cakes. God. All right, so we'll wrap it up with the last thing. Some of these proposed bans with DJI. I think the chatter's sort of settled down a little bit with that. What's your hot take on those proposed bans, and where do you think ultimately that's going to land or end up? I personally, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. It doesn't seem like they have enough backing from respective parties as a whole, and I think I think there's some informed people in Congress and the Senate when it comes to regards to these things.
So I took a little bit of slack from people for mentioning the story in the first place, because a lot of people in the industry said, well, we know that this isn't going anywhere. And I said, yes, I know that this bill is probably dead in the water. Sure. on arrival, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be talking about it and telling those representatives or those lawmakers that the next time they had that thinking that maybe they want to do this, that they should shut it down right away because the people are against it. And so it's important, even if we know the bill is dead in the water. Yeah, it's not going to prevent the next person from coming up. And we don't know when these bills come out, where they hide, how advertised they are. So anytime we hear about them, we need to mention it, and we need to contact the people in charge of the bill to fight it, because otherwise, at one point, one is going to slip through, and we're going to be like, "Holy crap! That's my fear. How come nobody talked about it?"
Right, exactly. And I think there's a strong misconception when it comes to the manufacturers. And when you start talking about Chinese companies, probably the most common comment I saw was, well, they're in China, they have to comply with CCP. which isn't entirely true because I did a lot of research and looked into this, and there actually is private companies in China, like private companies that they have no involvement with the government there. And DJI is listed as a private company. There's no involvement, and there's no sign of when they first started, there was investment from the government. I think it was like a 20% stake at the time. From my understanding, they don't have any stake as of right now. It's a private company based in Shenzhen. Same thing with Autel. So Autel is predominantly owned by the automotive side. So there's no investment. I've talked to Frank from Autel. I've also talked to Max about this in great lengths. And, basically, if Frank wanted to, he could sell Autel to his son, Max, who is a dual citizen of Canada and the United States, and it would no longer be a Chinese company. He can sell it to him for $1, and it would instantly no longer be a Chinese, essentially would no longer be a Chinese company. I mean,
and look, and I get it. I'm not more of a fan of buying a product from and fill in the blank for the country outside of the United States. I
just don't care. I
want
just want the best product that's available.
Well, so let's put it this way, and I'm all good with. I would love the United States to be competitive
Sure.
on creating amazing drones. The reality is we're not there, and
No.
the reality is also every time you go to a trade show, look around and tell me how many of these companies would disappear if we get rid of DJI tomorrow. And the answer is a tremendous amount.
Correct.
What does this do to the entire industry? We crash an entire industry because a few companies out there can compete. So they're going to lobby to ban the biggest competitor.
Some of these companies actually use DJI SDK for their flight controllers and for their software. So even still, they would completely go away because they rely so heavily there. I mean, there's a lot, but I mean, I have always been a huge fan of, like, you cannot stomp out your competitor because they're better than you. Your competitor being better or having a greater product should compel you to do better. I mean, one could easily say the same thing about the drone, the online training scene.
Mm-hmm.
Your competitors should want to elevate their game in some capacity to do better because they say, well, hey, these guys are having so much success and they're building a community. We should build a community as well. Yep. But guess what? None of them have built a community or done any actual outreach to any of the groups or in any capacity. They haven't. They still set. So their own demise their own undoing has been done at their own hands, not anybody else. But that's what it should be. Yep. You should see somebody doing better and say, okay, how can I elevate my game? Not how can I take them out or how can I destroy them? It's let me elevate my understanding of things, or let me elevate my product to get people to want to buy it. Like, that's, I don't understand. Like, I'm looking at right across from me, I see the Skydio 2 Plus sitting over here. This is a drone frame that's now going airframe that's over 4 years old. Same camera. It in my opinion, it does not compete in any capacity today. It's interesting technology, but it's still not 100% refined, and they just still don't really have the hardware all flushed out 4 years later. But yet here they are taking in massive amounts of government money because everybody's pounding their chest. It's got to be American made. I don't know. Like, if the only car that was available was a Pinto, I wouldn't drive it.
There is a solution, right?
Yeah.
Right now, if the government wants to intervene, and I know this is not always a popular opinion because it can be seen as socialism, but
right.
Why not have the government invest money into R&D and into making American companies be able to compete? Then we can start to talk about looking at
what a novel idea.
How do we get rid of we have the product now that we can provide to our troops, that we can provide to our public safety agencies, instead of saying, let's get rid of all these tools that you guys have been using you go back to using a pair of binoculars and then just your naked vision in order to do your job, because there is no drone that does what the competition is doing that you
A-
want to ban.
and
So let's
that's the
get
hardest thing to do. That's the
yep.
hardest thing to do,
So
is to hand these people tools that just don't work. And that's exactly what happened here in Florida. And I see this. They were handed tools that are of a lesser performance, a lesser quality. Here, do the same job, save the same lives, but oh, by the way, it's going to be
mhm.
harder because you have many more limitations. That doesn't make sense. That's such a knee-jerk thing to do, I
No.
think.
Yep, but let's help the American companies to compete, because the other company is huge, and
Yep.
we're going to need to have an influx of something in order to help. Then let's do that instead of doing what we're doing right now, which I think is not working.
Yeah.
We're going to end up with the same thing. We're going to end up with no options, and I guarantee you, if DJI is gone, we're going to kill 50 to 70% of the entire industry. All the resellers are not going to be gone because they don't have a product to sell. All the people that are working around this industry are going to be gone, and we're just going to shoot ourselves in the foot, and that's, I think, a horrible thing. So
Yeah, you really go backwards, um, if they go away, or anybody, and that goes for Alltel as well. You really go backwards in the industry, and I think you lose engagement risk, because I'm not gonna lie, walking around, AVUSI, and you know, for the most part, most of these booths, most of these manufacturers, I hate to say it, they're uninteresting. They're uninteresting. There's no
mhm,
excitement. They don't know how to approach you. I will tell you that the vast majority in the industry are socially awkward. They are socially awkward. They don't do
mhm.
anything to say, hey, let me tell you about what this is. Like, I walked around, I saw some amazing products, but as I'm standing there, I mean, you get this 1,000-foot stare from people like, it's another human. I felt like it was like, Toy Story, the claw, like as you walk up, like, because they don't know what to do. They're like, what can we tell? They don't tell you anything. But there was a lot of amazing products that we saw. But I feel like a lot of those companies, every year I see it in every trade show. I go back the next year, and somebody I saw isn't there the following year because they just couldn't. They couldn't make it. They couldn't get the funding. They couldn't get the groundwork running. So it would be interesting if they did invest in some companies. But yeah, I can see how people would have a problem with that, even though it is for a betterment of an industry. People are weird,
Yep.
man. People are
I
weird.
mean, Airbus did it in Europe. Airbus is heavily funded by the French government and other
Yeah,
European governments, and they've been able to go from the ground up and compete with
Boeing.
Boeing year after year. So
I mean,
it is
right now, I'd say
expensive,
they're pretty
but
neck and
um,
neck. They're neck and neck right now, I would say.
yeah,
Airbus is getting some crazy orders. Obviously,
yeah.
um, the Max situation didn't help. St. Kenny says, "Hey Ken, any talk about raising the drone weight limit?" So that was something else that came up. The weight limit. People are in
Not
belief that the
happening.
249 is too light. What's your take on that?
So I'll tell you what's coming into so in order to change that regulation, there needs to be an act of Congress, which means that in the Reauthorization Act, every 5 or 6 years, Congress needs to put it in there to
Yeah.
mandate to the FAA that they change the regulation. It's not happening in 2013, I can tell you that. It's not 2023, sorry, 2023, and it's not happening until 2029. So if anything is going to change, it's going to be after 2029. I
And by
think there
then,
are
who knows?
processes. Well, there might be a way to make it happen, but quite frankly, here's the thing: the FAA is data oriented, and
Sure.
so they're going to be asking whatever number you come up with. You're going to have to say, "Well, where's the data?" And you're going
Right.
to have to show the FAA some data. You can't just say, "Well, 1 kilo is a nice round number," although you're going to say, "Well, where does the 250 come from?" And the 250 has a long history somewhere. Brendan Schulman told me the story one time, but I can't remember. But there was a reason behind it, and it's very awkward. And so there was not a whole lot of reason behind 250, but by the same token, is 1 kilo, 2 pounds, 2.2 or 2.1 pounds? Is that really any different? So I don't know. I like the idea of raising the weight, because I do believe that a slightly heavier drone is not going to have that much of an impact. But again, it's for
You never know.
registration, which I don't think is that much of a burden in the first place. So I'm kind of torn on this. So yeah, but I can tell you it's not happening at least this year or next year, at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, something to watch for, but what time is it? It's 10:11. So I think that's everything for tonight. Hopefully you guys got a lot of information. I will do a better job tomorrow of time stamping this at some point. I got a flight to catch at 8 a.m. tomorrow to go to Philly. Yeah, I think
Gonna
that's
go
it.
see your boyfriend?
Yeah. We try to do it once a month, or not. We try to get together and fly once a month. It's a thing. It's visitation rights. Visitation rights.
Child vegetation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Father's Day.
Wait, was he in the chat? Was he in the chat?
I don't know. He's probably filming another bridge. You saw that,
That's
right? He filmed the Philadelphia.
I did see that.
From my understanding, now I can't tie the two together, but I don't know. I hear he's sitting on rooftops waiting for the next thing to just get destroyed in Philadelphia to film it. That's what I'm understanding. He's like the reverse.
You'll find out this weekend.
He's like the reverse Batman, man. He's like the reverse Batman.
Yeah, I hope he's watching. I don't see him in the comments, but he's
no, he's probably hyperlapsing something. Who knows?
He came in, he did the thumbs down, and then he left. That's what he did.
What? He just comes in. He's like SpongeBob, man. He comes in, breaks a bunch of shit, and leaves. All right. Well, that's going to do it tonight. If you guys are interested in any of the courses that we offer, we have a real estate course that is on sale right now. You can use code DroneBrews if you want to save additional monies. So there's the discount spring that's out there, but if you want to save additional monies, this is like the Kroger of courses. You can add additional monies off. Go for it. Drone Brews is the code. You can check it out. There's the mapping course. There is the 107 course. Ken Torbeck, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Much appreciated as always. But if you guys have any questions, I will be in the comments, try to answer any from the stream. And if you're interested in anything Greg has to say, he does the weekly newscast. So it's a great source of information. So be sure to subscribe to Pilot Institute's channel. Check that out. And that happens religiously every single week. Doesn't matter if Greg's had too much to drink or not. You're going to get your news the same time each and every week, just as consistent as always. That's going to do it. I will see you guys next week. Greg?
See you next week. Oh, wait.
No, probably not. No, Greg. Stay originally.
Wait,
right.
Billy gets visitation, but I don't.
You want me to come to Prescott? I'll come out. I would love to. I haven't seen Pilot Institute 55 6.0 or what. I don't even know what revision we're on. I need to go to Prescott again. You need to have us out there. We should have a barbecue, a whole crew barbecue. All right, that's going to do it. We'll see you next time.
Maybe I'll just get out my head and focus on what I know's coming. Yeah. 'Cause I can't fall asleep at night without seeing my dreams. Delusionary reality, I'm somewhere in between. These voices in my head get loud and they keep telling me that I'm a fool for trusting in these wings. But maybe, baby, this